Two men, two failures, one pattern. The first thought effort was enough. It wasn't. The second thought he had nothing to prove to anyone except the 17-year-old watching him. Both of them are wrong about what actually gets counted. This isn't therapy. It's a reckoning. For the men who've been lied to about love, and the women who sold safety instead of truth. We say the things you're not supposed to say out loud. I'm Author. This is Cuff. Every week, we go deeper. Welcome back to Cuffed, episode 37. Today we're sitting inside two ideas that look unrelated on the surface. The first is about second chances. What happens when a man does the work but still fails at the words? The second is about a daughter, 17 years old, already smarter about people than most adults will ever be. On the surface, these are different stories. Underneath, there's the same lesson told from two different rooms. One is about what you owe a woman when you already let her down once. The other is about what you're building in the woman who are watching you before they ever have a reason to forgive you. Two musings, 20 minutes. Let's get into it. First, musing 125. Link to it down in the show notes. Go there, click through and read it. Title is, I had a laundry list of excuses. She just wanted an apology. She left instead. As I wrote, this whole idea and concept about effort, words, and sometimes the mismatch between them came from a late night discussion I was having with a Red Room subscriber. And what came up was this idea of if effort is greater than words, especially with men, like we've talked about hundreds of times on this podcast and in the writing. Men are simple. Watch where they put their effort. Their effort follows their heart. The problem is not overriding that. But if effort is greater than words, then does that mean someone who has been putting forth tremendous effort and maybe hasn't been the best communicator, or maybe they haven't been able to express themselves as clearly or as often as needed, does that person deserve a second chance? And I realize that given what had happened between Tabitha and I, again, that's linked in Musing 25, so go read that, and the link to the whole backstory is there. I'm not going to go too into it just for the sake of time. But anyway, I showed up to our last conversation with a laundry list of what I thought were important things to discuss to let her in and understand the pressure that I was under. But what that did was, instead of owning it and just literally sitting down and saying, I screwed up, I failed you, I wasn't who you needed me to be in that moment, I see where I went wrong, I'm going to do better. It became about me and what I was under. But I will say this, and I think and I hope that she would agree if we could ask her. If there ever seemed like I didn't put forth tremendous effort, but and here's the thing, I put forth effort in the things that in the long run didn't matter, but I did put in the effort. That's my love language, is like, I remember the small things. I love to do the small things to surprise you that I remember them. But in that instance, I fucked up because I wasn't present. I didn't own it. I wasn't accountable to her. And from there was no runway for repair. But if the effort is there, should you give that person a second chance in the hope that the communication of the words can find their way out? Hopefully by this point, I am a good example of a man who put the effort in, who loved someone dearly, and ended up losing that person. But I'm a reminder or an example of what a man can become when he finally loses something dear. In that instance, I think, and I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible because I'm thinking about it from my perspective. If I had seen the growth of someone after losing me and wanting a second chance, I don't know how I wouldn't give them a second chance. Especially when, yes, it's words, but in my example, look what Cuffed has become. You're talking about 13 months of writing and creating, 126 musings, 64 bedroom directives, 37 Cuff podcasts, and 10 Red Room podcasts. That's a body of work that I'm tremendously proud of. Again, yes, those are words, but that is effort. And I think if somebody really put forth the effort, then yes, they deserve a second chance. But here's the thing about second chances. Everything has to be laid out on the table. Because if you're going to give it a second chance and everything isn't put on that table, then it's going to fail. And here's why. Men especially need to understand how it hurt. Because when most guys think about repair, we need to understand what needs to be repaired. Not only the feeling, but what created the feeling. Hey, when, in my example, if Tabitha was like, hey, you didn't let me fully in. Here is how that made me feel. Or, you didn't disclose everything that was going on in your life. That affected me in this way. And explain how it hurt, because now I know what it cost, how it hurt, and what I need to do to not do that. The other thing about it is any grievances, any slights, any nasty things that might have been said, that needs to all be on the table. Because here's the thing that we all can agree on, hopefully. What isn't said and put out into the light becomes resentment. Those things burrow under the skin, go deep inside, and they never leave. They're always there, just right under the surface, and it festers. And so this is two parts, obviously. So yes, if a guy's heart or is putting the effort in, that tells you his heart is in the right place. If the problem is he's not putting the effort in, that's a completely different issue. I don't. That should tell you everything you need to know. But if he's really really trying and just fucking up, second chance. I would say for sure. Communication, all that stuff needs to be discussed. It needs to be put out there. How it hurt, when it hurt, how it hurt, because that's how guys work on repair. They need it laid out. We're not good at insinuating feelings. You need to be direct and give that clarity. And then that sets the expectations. Like, if you don't communicate like this is how I feel. And if I feel like this, then this is going to happen or this isn't going to work. And lay it out. Okay, that's the first section, Musing 125. Again, head over to cuffedmedia.com, read it. Now we're on to Musing 126, and the title of that is The Daughter Data. This idea, both of these musings this past week were like last minute. I actually put things that I had written because these things popped up and I wanted to write about it and get it up on the site while it was so fresh. But I was having a conversation with a single mother, and we were talking about when you get older and you're dating, like, things get messy because regardless if we want to admit it or not as parents, when you start dating again, no matter how great your relationship is with your ex and your kids and how good you are with your time, it's baggage. The person coming into your life is already entering an established life. There's already structure to it. There's already time commitments. You might have your children every other weekend, so that's going to impact time you could potentially spend with them. There's also a relationship with an ex that's going to be coming into the relationship if you want it to or not. The one thing that I thought about, because I have been so tremendously proud of my eldest, my daughter, specifically because she is in college, visitation, choosing where she thinks she wants to go and so forth. And I am going to give you the exact moment when this idea came up, paired with what I had discussed with the single mother and the baggage with dating when you have kids. My oldest, specifically so far, likes colleges that has little to no Greek life because she is not remotely interested in rushing and being in a sorority or whatever. When I asked her about it, I was blown away. As you know, as a parent, you wonder how well you have raised your children. In their younger years, it's just about keeping them safe and make sure they're developing on track and being a nice person, whatever. But you don't really see who your children are going to turn out to be until their teenage years, when they start becoming real people, like having responsibilities, having a schedule, people relying on them. And I'm not just saying this because, quite honestly, if my kids were not that great, I would be talking about that too. But my oldest is just, when I asked her about the sorority and so forth, she just is so focused on her goals, her dreams, and her careers. But more importantly, she already knows that If she's chasing external validation, whether it's being in a certain sorority or a club or whatever it is, that isn't where true happiness comes from. True happiness is being at peace and comfortable with who you are and the decisions you have made. Because if you can get to that point, that's the freedom that you're able to get. She's already getting that freedom in her teenage years, which to me is absolutely incredible. And as a parent, I am so tremendously proud of her. I'm proud of all my children, but I'm extremely, extremely proud of her, especially she has made great decisions for herself. Yes, when she asked my input, I gave her my input, but I gave her the agency to make her own decisions, and she has been remarkable in picking her decisions. But more importantly, she's learning things, and she already understands things inherently that most adults never figure out, or they don't figure it out till much later in their life. One thing that I tell people all the time that's great about getting in your 40s is every day that goes by, you care less and less about other people's opinion of you. It is the most liberating thing in the entire world. I can only imagine, had I seen that modeled by my parents, to be where my oldest is at, already at 17 years old. That, to me, is absolutely amazing. And I am tremendously proud of the fact that clearly it has been modeled for her. I've never allowed her to shrink herself, to make certain friends, to fit in a certain group, to be this or that. I've never allowed that. I've always encouraged her to speak up and use her voice for all my kids, but especially my girls, because I know a lot of times there's that pressure to not say what you're thinking or whatever, because you might be labeled a bitch. And I hate that that's used by men because a woman speaks up for herself and doesn't put up with their nonsense. So, this started, I think, in one way we thought it was going to be just about, figuring things out in life, but this is extraordinarily deep, and this is where ground in the earned doctrine sits in squarely. And I hope that through continued work that we will all continue to get to a point where I think no matter what, there's always going to be those tugs of external validation, because let's be honest, it feels really nice to belong. But are we belonging because it actually makes us happy? Or are we belonging because it's safe? That's really what we have to pull apart and make sure that we're doing these things, but I'm not trying to say that clubs aren't a good thing or whatever you truly enjoy. But only you know why you are doing it. And I think that's where the real work is and the real honesty has to come in, is that we're honest to ourselves and we know why we're doing it. And it's because it fulfills us and that makes us truly happy. It's not just to be like, I just wrote about the country club. It's not joining a country club just to be seen, just to spend certain amounts of money to look a certain way. That's a totally different animal. And we dealt with that last week. Okay, that's the episode for this week. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Hold the standard. Stay close.